Welcome in, Minnesota sports fans, to another edition of Timberwolves on SI right here on the Bring Me the Sports YouTube channel and Facebook page as well. Jonathan Harrison here, joined once again by Nolan O'Hara, Will Ragatz, and Tony Liebert to talk about the Timberwolves. And Nolan, let's start off with you. A bit of a disappointing upset last night, 122-108 blowout at the hands of the Trailblazers. Kind of speaks to the problems that the Wolves have had so far this season. Only a 6-5 start, down in the lower parts of the Western Conference standings. What's been going on with the Wolves this season?
You think you look at that game and you can just say turnovers, right? They turned it over 23 times, season high. Um, it's just clunky a lot of times on offense. It was really clunky with the starting unit starting off. And then the bench, which has usually been a strength for the team this year, just didn't really have it last night, aside from Nas Reed, who played really well. But it's just they've been kind of shooting themselves in the foot, turning it over, a lot of sloppy mistakes, not quite on the same page. I think a lot of it is still just that they're a team that hasn't played much together and they're not quite all on the same page yet. But the turnovers are certainly a big problem for the starting unit and the bench too, and they need to kind of clean that up. And I think we'll probably see a team that is a little more motivated tonight, coming off that pretty ugly loss last night.
Will, you wrote about this on Timberwolves on SI. Anthony Edwards having some comments about the struggles and about not getting down on themselves. What did he have to say about the Wolves' struggles, and what are your thoughts and takeaways of what you've seen so far from this Wolves squad?
Yeah, I mean, Ant just basically said it's game 11. It's a long season. We can't kind of dwell on these two losses because it's been a rough 3-day stretch for the Wolves, between losing to a bad Blazers team that had just lost by like 45 to Memphis a couple of days earlier, and then on Sunday when the Wolves had a 8-point lead late against the Jimmy Butlerless Heat, and they choked that with some poor execution and lost that game at home. They just have to kind of shake off these losses and move forward and keep going. But I mean, Nolan kind of said it a little bit. I think part of the issue has been just the edge that they've played with and the intensity. And that was such a hallmark of last year's Wolves teams, both on offense, but particularly on the defensive end, where they were just really hard to play against. And there wasn't a lot of that in the game against the Blazers. They obviously, turnovers were an issue, but a lot of them were careless, sloppy turnovers. Defensively, they were giving up tons of open threes. I mean, the Blazers shot the ball uncharacteristically well, but a lot of them were open looks because the Wolves' defensive rotations weren't good enough. And the second half, they would occasionally cut it to 8 points, 10 points, something like that, and then it would just be a bad turnover or a Blazers transition opportunity or a wide open three or just things like that, where even sometimes they'd get a stop on defense and then they'd be trying to push the ball and they'd turn it right back over. And so it was a frustrating game, but I do expect them to definitely come out with a lot more energy tonight in the second leg of this back-to-back against a bad Portland team that is now going to be without Robert Williams.
Tony?
Yeah, I mean, I would kind of agree with everything that Will and Nolan said. I think this has just kind of been a team that made a lot of moves in the offseason, trying to figure out what everyone's role is. It's pretty obvious that Anthony Edwards is the alpha on the team, but trading someone like Karl Anthony Towns impacts team chemistry, and there's just no way to avoid that. And I think that's really all we're seeing. It's just early struggles, and they're just kind of seeing, like, Anthony Edwards hasn't played with Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo, and it's just figuring out where all of these people fit into the mix. And I can't say I'm entirely surprised that they've started out this slow, because they did make a just massive move in the offseason. And I don't think it was just going to magically all click right away. And I personally think that's just kind of what we're seeing. And when you look on the schedule and you see the Trailblazers 3 times within a week, you're going to kind of be like, oh, we can just coast through this time. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing, but that might just be my optimistic view.
Yeah, I just think, like, you're right. It's definitely going to take time for this team to gel, and that's part of why they're 6-5, and they've been so up and down. And they've looked really good at times. They blew out the Hornets and the Blazers in the first game. They had that big win over the Nuggets, but there's also been a lot of downs. And I just think to lose like that to a Blazers team that didn't have Anthony Simons, didn't have DeAndre Ayton. I mean, they're getting killed by Toumani Kamara and Denny Avdia and like just random guys. That to me was an effort thing and a want to. And so if they don't come out on Wednesday night tonight and show a lot more intensity, if they somehow lose twice in 2 nights to Portland, that I might start to hit the panic button a little bit, even though it's really early with a new look roster.
That was going to be my next question for you guys. Is 6-5 start, obviously only 11 games into a very, very long season. It's only November. At what point, if it continues to look the way it has, do we become concerned? At what game marker do we start to be concerned about what this team could be this season, Nolan?
I think you have to give it quite a bit of time. I would say at least like halfway through the season. It's just going to take, expect for sure like 20, 30 games is just going to be figuring it out territory. And then as the season kind of goes on, you might have some things figured out, but I think it takes time. I mean, Finch said the other night, it took him, a year and a half to figure out how to get Rudy Gobert involved on the offensive side. So some of these things really take time. And these are huge roster changes. I think and even in the early season, like there are times where things have looked really good, especially offensively. Even in that Heat game where they didn't shoot the ball really well, but early in the game, they initially had really great ball movement, just missed a lot of open shots. Then it looked pretty clunky after that. And then it started to look good again. And then it looked really clunky again at the end. So I think you can kind of see the flashes. It's not always been there, but I think this is really something you need to kind of let ride for a while. I think the one thing that you could get you clicking the panic button a little earlier is if you keep seeing kind of like the defensive efforts that you maybe saw last night, where they just kind of let Portland get what they wanted. And I think that could be a concern because they played with a lot more intensity last year. That was kind of a hallmark of this team. They're a hungry team. And if they just don't really ever show that hunger in the next, 10 games, I think that could be an early concern. But as far as the chemistry thing goes, missing shots, some of the, goofy turnovers we've seen that's just going to happen as they keep getting used to playing together. So I think you got to give it like half a season to really get the picture of what you're getting here.
Yeah, I think that's pretty well said. And I guess so far this season, if there was one thing to be concerned about, I think it would be kind of their defensive motivation a little bit, because a thing that Towns did really well the last few years, I think, and the team as a whole, is they played with like a chip on their shoulder that people were doubting them and saying that the Gobert Towns thing was never going to work. And it kind of played like they used that as motivation. And after their deep run in the playoffs, now it would be real easy to be like, for them to think, oh, we're one of the top teams in the West. We can just kind of coast through the regular season and then turn it on in the second half of the year, which isn't a horrible strategy. And we've seen that work out for NBA teams in the last decade, really. But I think that's a little part into the equation here, that they might be a little too comfortable. And maybe this is a good thing and this is going to motivate them. But I think that adds to the aspect a little bit.
Yeah, I'm with Nolan. I think we give this till at least January, something like that, to really make sweeping judgments about who this Wolves team is and who they are going to be down the stretch. I think if there's a real basketball concern post Cat trade with this current team, it's maybe the rim protection when Rudy Gobert isn't on the floor, because Naz Reid, Julius Randle, they're gifted offensively, but they're not known necessarily as great defensive players, especially if Rudy's not playing and one of them's at the 5. The Blazers with Robert Williams and even the rookie Donovan Clingan, they were getting a lot of easy looks at the rim, especially when Rudy Gobert wasn't in the game. So I think that's maybe a legitimate concern. They need Naz to be able to play defense and to rebound when he's getting some time at the 5. The team is not very good right now. They're 6-5. They've been fairly mediocre. I mean, they're not a bad team, but they have a long ways to go to be at the level that they were at last year. I just think it's going to take time. They have to gel offensively. Mike Conley, Dante DiVincenzo, they've been kind of off to slow shooting starts. You would expect based on their career numbers. that's going to regress positively. So Anthony Edwards, the shooting and just everything he's doing so far this season has been really encouraging. They need more. They need consistency from him in terms of ball movement, not over dribbling, locking in defensively. But he's been really good. A lot of the players in their top 8 have done a lot of really good things so far. So I think the ceiling is still there for what this team could be come playoff time. But this is all just part of the process of figuring it out, and it's a process that is going to last at least a few more months.
Yeah, absolutely. Do appreciate anybody who's tuning in live to us on YouTube or our Facebook page. If you've got questions or comments of your own, throw them in the chat. We'll acknowledge them and answer any of those questions that you have as well. Do appreciate you watching. Do you guys see any changes to the starting 5 or any of the rotations that they've got going, that Chris Finch has got going on right now? Any changes to those starting lineups or any of those rotations, Nolan?
I would probably be pretty surprised if we see any change as far as the starting 5 goes, barring injury or any other kind of issue like that. I do think the rotation is for sure going to change. It's not going to be 8 guys all year. There will be a 9th guy. It's kind of looking like that. Will be Minot right now. It seems like he's kind of past Ingles as far as the guy who's getting those, 3-4 minute stints right now is the 9th man. So I do think there will be a more 9-10 kind of rotation where you get like full 9-man minutes for Minot and maybe somebody else thrown in there. But I think Finch has really been focusing on trying to build the chemistry with that top 8, because those are the top 8 they're going to rely on come playoff time, and they just haven't had time together. And I think it's just the chemistry thing. Again, he knows it's going to take time, but there will be more of a rotation. And tonight, with Mike Conley resting, we'll get to see somebody a little bit more. I think chances are Dante's probably going to be in the starting 5. Could be Nikhil too. This might be an opportunity for Dillingham to get some minutes off the bench. Minot will probably get some more minutes, and this is kind of one of those games, especially coming off a game like last night's, where there's opportunity, right? If people aren't playing well, there's going to be opportunity to get out there on the court. And Finch kind of said that in his post-game press conference too, that this is kind of an opportunity. So maybe somebody seizes it tonight, but it's not going to be an 8-man rotation the whole season. That's just a early season figure out the chemistry kind of thing.
Yeah, if they're not going to show the intensity, like in the way that they didn't show it last night, you bet Chris Finch is going to put somebody out there who maybe will. I think there's a chance it'll fluctuate. I mean, the Conley thing is interesting because he just hasn't been very good to start this season. He's averaging about 7 points. He's shooting 31% from the field, 31% from 3. He's just looked really rough. I don't want to suddenly say that at age 37 in his 18th season that he's hit some cliff, because he was so good for the Wolves just earlier this year in the playoffs and last season and coming over in that trade 2 years ago. So I'm not there yet by any means. It's been 11 games. There's a lot of season left. Conley's been so steady throughout his career. But if you're watching this prior to the game Wednesday night, it's really an interesting kind of opening with Conley resting for the first time all year. So the first game that any member of the Wolves top 8 will have missed. So yeah, I think, like Nolan said, either DiVincenzo or Alexander Walker starts. But I think we could see Rob Dillingham get his first non-garbage time minutes, and that could be pretty exciting, just with the potential that he has to inject some life into things with his pace and his playmaking and his scoring ability. He's 19 years old. I mean, we knew it was going to be tough for him to see some early minutes with the backcourt that this team has after adding DiVincenzo, but I'd like to see Rob Dillingham get 15 minutes, 20 minutes, something like that tonight, and just see what he can do in that role. And maybe he plays well and he earns more minutes moving forward, perhaps at the expense of Conley. But we'll see. For the most part, I do think they're going to stick with the 8 that they've played so far. But again, if it continues to be a little shaky like this, especially in terms of energy, I don't think Finch is going to be afraid to give some other people opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. Tony, before we go, because I know we got to get you out of here because you're heading over to the barn tonight. Give us a preview. You've seen the Gophers men's basketball team in action a couple times now. 2 games, 2-0, an 80-57 win over Oral Roberts, a 68-64 win over Nebraska Omaha. They take on North Texas tonight. What have you seen from them? What's the preview for that game tonight at the Barn?
Yeah, so North Texas, on paper, they're not this dominant program that you've recognized from a power conference, but they're a really solid mid-major team. They play at one of the slowest paces in the country, so this is going to be a defensive slugfest in this game. But the Gophers are very banged up heading into the game. Mike Mitchell Jr. is going to be out for a couple weeks, their lead guard. But I personally still think they're going to have the depth to compete in this game, and they kind of have to because there's not many opportunities on their non-conference schedule to pick up marquee wins. But Dawson Garcia is questionable. If he's able to go, I think the Gophers have enough to win this game, but it's borderline as must-win as you can get in November. I don't think there's a true must-win game in college basketball in November, but losing this game would make their path to the NCAA tournament very difficult. So it's a big game early in the season for Ben Johnson in Minnesota.
Looking forward to it, boys. I know, Nolan, you will be covering the Timberwolves game tonight. That one tips off at 9 p.m. Central Time. That one out in Portland. Once again, the third game in 4 games against Portland for the Timberwolves. So interesting kind of scheduling choices there by the NBA. Nolan, you'll have the recap of that over on Timberwolves on SI. And Tony, you will have the recap of the Gophers game over on Gophers on SI. And Will and Tony and Nolan covering everything Minnesota sports over on Gophers, Twins, Timberwolves, and Badgers on SI as well. I'm probably forgetting something there as well. I'm sure it's a lot going on right now, but looking forward to all that coverage. Go read it, and appreciate you guys watching over on the Bring Me the Sports Facebook page and Bring Me the Sports YouTube channel. Click subscribe on the YouTube channel. It does help us get found. Also notifies you every time we post a new video or go live. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow right back here with another topic across Minnesota sports.